The number of attendees at tomorrow's Oval Office meeting between President Trump and the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky is growing. The UK Prime Minister and other European leaders are preparing to travel to Washington to join the talks as the world waits on edge to see Ukraine accept Russia's peace proposal.
And President Vladimir Putin wants full control of two regions in eastern Ukraine. In exchange, he says he'll freeze the front line elsewhere as long as the U.S. recognizes the land captured by Moscow.
President Trump briefed Zelensky on Russia's offer while speaking on the phone on his way back from his Alaska summit with Putin. Reports show it was a difficult call, as Zelensky was previously rejected giving up this territory. But the commander-in-chief making it clear that a peace deal needs to be made over a ceasefire.
And Zelensky seemingly agrees, posting in part, "The positions are clear. A real peace must be achieved, one that will be lasting, not just another pause between Russian invasions."
Tomorrow marks his return to the White House since his testy Oval Office exchange with Donald Trump, President Trump, and Vice President Vance back in February.
All right, so now we're going to bring in a very special guest. We're going to bring in Fox News Sunday anchor and Fox News chief legal correspondent, Shannon Bream. And Shannon, I would imagine there's a lot of talk in D.C. about this. This is a big deal.
Yeah, and we all remember that super awkward meeting in the Oval Office back in February. Well, this time Zelensky is coming with backup, and the posse continues to grow this morning as we're finding out which leaders are going to join him. But I think that they feel like they want to make sure that they have in recent weeks said, listen, this is about Ukraine. It has to have a seat at the table. Zelensky has to be there for something to be negotiated. You can't do this without Ukraine. He was by himself last time, and we saw how that turned out. So it looks like he's going to have a lot of European firepower with him when he comes in to have these negotiations, based on the fallout of what President Trump has communicated from that Alaska meeting.
You call them backup, maybe babysitters might be a better word for that. But it is interesting that the way this unfolded, where President Trump said, I'm going to speak to Putin without the Europeans first, and the Europeans felt left out. And there's a reason for that. I mean, Zelensky is much more aligned with the globalists in Europe. And Putin and Donald Trump, by the way, are the thorns in the side of the globalists in Europe. And so now Zelensky comes in with this background that you talked about, this really contentious meeting. But he says, I better bring in, or maybe they say, we better help him out. So he gets as much as he can in this. Do you think that this could end well, and maybe by the end of the week, because, you know, we're on Trump time, maybe we get an agreement by the end of the week?
I don't know. I mean, it seems like there's such massive stuff to still be nailed down. When you talk about the Donbas region, I mean, that was a pre-war. There were 6.5 million people who lived there as Ukrainians. So to say that you would cede that territory, I mean, obviously Zelensky in the past has said that's a no-go. He thinks it's a perfect staging point for future attacks from Russia into Ukraine, and that this isn't going to end it. So I think the Europeans being here, along with us, along with Zelensky, like that conversation about how you really put together security guarantees that will have teeth to them, and how that cooperation works. Does it mean boots on the ground? What does it mean? Right. I think there's so many big things to get to. I think, you know, hopefully you move the chess pieces a bit on Monday, but I don't know when you get to that big all-encompassing decision now that President Trump seems to say it's not going to be a ceasefire and then negotiate. It's going to be the whole package at once.
Yeah, you know, Shannon, not to belabor the point, stick too long on this White House meeting tomorrow, but I do think it's kind of amazing. You think about all of sort of the dramatic scenes that we've witnessed just over the last couple of days regarding all of this. I'm trying to remember the last time I saw the leaders of multiple countries all gathered, I assume, in the Oval Office at the same time. You know, you'll have them come in individually, or you might have a state dinner where, you know, the president of France might invite, but you've got the president of Germany, you've got the president of France, you've got Keir Starmer coming. I don't remember the last time I've seen so many heads of state who apparently will be meeting in the Oval Office.
Yeah, and you guys know, I mean, the Oval doesn't have a ton of room. If these guys all bring staffers, it's going to get real cozy in there real fast.
Yeah.
So I wonder how much, if it is in the Oval, how much of it we will see. I mean, obviously the cameras were there last time Zelensky was here to watch that whole thing unfold. But you're right. I mean, usually something of this magnitude, you see that there's been a gathering that's been planned months in advance, the G20, a NATO summit, that kind of thing. So the fact that this is coming together in real time as of tomorrow here in Washington, President Trump is very unconventional in the way that he does things and the way that the meeting came together for Alaska and this one too. So I'll be very interested to see. Glued to this meeting tomorrow.
Well, they bring it from the White House down south. Texas is trying to get their legislature back together. It looks like the Democrats that have literally run away may come back as early as tomorrow, but they're only going to do it, I guess, if they'll. I think this is, I can't even say it. I think it's in Latin, sine die. Basically, if the session adjourns on Friday. And also, this is an interesting one. They'll only come back to Texas to do their job in Texas if they know California is going to introduce legislation or a ballot to basically equal out the 5 seats that Greg Abbott would like to get. What's going on with that?
So you guys have heard the Texas Democrats saying, like, this is a victory. We're coming back, some of them, to take a victory lap because we got that special session closed down. Well, just knowing that Governor Abbott just going to start a new special session and they're still going to have to end up voting on this stuff. But maybe it's a Pyrrhic victory. When you talk about California, though, it's one of those states, unlike Texas, they would have to do some amending of their state laws and their functioning to actually get this done. So does the governor get that onto the ballot by November? And what do the people there do? Because polling shows that they like the independent commission, most Californians, that has put together their latest map. So it's a heavy lift, but not impossible. But, you know, Texas tying its return, or these Democrats, to what California does, I don't know if it's just a symbolic victory for them.
And it's not like the independent commission in California isn't heavily tilted towards Democrats. I mean, you have 40% of Republicans in the state, and they have something like 17% of the representation in their congressional delegation. But it is interesting if you look at sort of the map of the places where Republicans could pick up gains if everybody decided to redraw the maps. Republicans would be at a distinct advantage if this happened everywhere, because Democrats over the years have been more successful at doing this. So what else have you got coming up on the show?
Well, just to mention, too, the White House has invited Indiana legislators to come here to talk about this. So Indiana may be in play as well.
Right.
We've got Steve Witkoff. He was in the meetings with Putin and Trump. And so hopefully we can get some more inside scoop on exactly what did and did not happen. And Jake Sullivan, who was national security advisor under the Biden administration, you heard Putin say this, you know, it wouldn't have happened if President Trump was the president. So taking a dig there at the Biden administration, but we'll talk to him about that. And we've also got Senator Eric Schmidt with us to talk about the court battles, how the left is using it, how the right can use it, and all of those that are playing out now at the Supreme Court, too.
Wow, what an excellent lineup. As always, Shannon Bream, Fox News Sunday. Make sure you catch that.
Great to see you guys.
We'll be watching.
Too.
Yeah.
See that?
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.